the sun sets, the undead awaken. To slake their hunger, they feed upon the herd of unaware mortals. Right beneath our noses, the kindred clash against their rivals as they vie for control of the city of San Francisco. Are you strong enough to cheat final death and see another night? Vampire the Masquerade Rivals expandable card game from Renegade Game Studios.
Welcome everyone to Vampire Wednesdays. I am Sarah Erickson, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Renegade Game Studios, and I am joined tonight by Matt Hyra, the designer of Vampire Rivals. How are you, Matt?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So tonight we're going to be chatting and doing a deep dive into the Toreador clan, but before we get there, I have a few really quick announcements, things to chat about. So first off, we did kind of big announcement last week about World of Darkness. If you would like to go and read all about that, please go check that out on the news section of our very brand new website that we just updated this week. So that was like 2 announcements in one. It's pretty exciting. So yes, we have updated our website a little bit to add some extra sections. There's a how to play section, there's a news section, and some other things. We have a lot more coming in the pipeline. We're getting really close to launching our card database. That's coming along really well. So keep an eye on that. There's more coming. Please make sure that you sign up for our forums, get an account on there, chat with other people who love Vampire and Masquerade. And of course, you can also find the link to our Discord channel there as well if you haven't joined us there as well. I know a few of you that I see in the comments have been on our Discord channel, so thank you for that. It's always good to see you there. And of course, here in the chat on Vampire Wednesdays. So yeah, that's most of our big announcements. The only other thing that I did want to just touch on is next week is a holiday. We are lucky enough to have the day off next Wednesday, so we actually won't be here, but we'll be reposting some stuff in case you just want to come and watch a video at the same time, same place. You're welcome to do that. We'll still have something for you, but we will be taking the day off. So let's get down to it. So Matt, tell us what we're talking about today. Give us a little overview of what this clan is all about.
Sure. Well, the Toreador are the masters of social attacks, and they are also the masters of kind of the city, really. I guess if Desiree wants to put up a couple cards, that'll help, and it'll take a minute there. So yeah, they especially they like going after the citizens, because the Toreador are the art lovers. They like to go to nightclubs and gallery openings and things like that. They like to be amongst the humans, and they like to love. You know, they want to be out there. They want to meet cool and interesting people. They want to learn about, you know, they want to talk to the hot artists in town and the up and coming rock stars, things like that. They want to be involved. You know, oftentimes Toreador will have, you know, they'll own a record label, you know, that kind of thing. They're just into arts and performance and beauty and love, and you find that in the big city amongst the citizenry, right? So all right, I think there's some cards up there right now. So these are the 3 cards that you're going to basically be starting with when you play the pre-constructed Toreador deck. Naturally, there's lots of customizing you can do, but we're just going to talk about what you get in that first pre-con, because that's going to be a lot of people's first time playing, and people will come to this video looking for tips on how to play because they just got the game. They decided, I'm going to play Toreador in my first game with my 2 siblings, and so I better bone up on how to play the Toreador, right? All right. So right off the bat, you've got a big Li Ju Chen, and she's a 6-cost vampire. She's got Aspects, Celerity, and Presence. Those are disciplines. She's got 1 point of physical, 2 points of social, and no mental. All right. Also in the starting card, so you're going to start with Li Ju Chen in play as your starting character, as your leader. All right. And you're also going to have the Haven, which gives +1 secrecy to characters in your Haven, which is typical. But her leader ability would be when a character in your coterie attaches a retainer, that character mends 1 blood. Now, that mending 1 blood isn't always going to do a lot on the very first turn of the game because you probably haven't taken any damage. You don't need to mend right then, right? But I'll show you plenty of ways that that will be super relevant, possibly even early on. And then the Toreador agenda playthings. When a character in your coterie attaches a citizen retainer, gain 1 agenda. All right. So if you recall the different citizens, they are out there, and when you defeat a citizen, you're automatically going to gain 1 agenda, because that's what happens when you defeat it. Whether you burn it or attach it, you're going to get 1 agenda. However, for playthings to trigger, you're actually going to want to attach that citizen as a retainer to gain 1 additional. So essentially, when a Toreador character gains a citizen retainer, if they defeat it in the city deck lineup, they're going to gain basically 2 agenda. If you manage to attach retainers in other ways, you don't trigger the when defeated text on citizens, but you will still gain 1 agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's pretty
Intently
useful.
there. I kind of saw you reading in there a little bit.
I was leaning in. I was interested.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
do really
that's
like
good.
how these work together. That's fun.
Yeah, so they're pretty good. And so obviously the penthouse encourages you to, or allows you to make to mend your vampire after they attach a retainer, because of course when you attach a retainer, you're going to get a little bit of, you're going to soak a little bit of blood off of them, right? I mean, why not, right? And then, but it's a great way to get a quick agenda as well, because essentially taking out a citizen in the streets and making them a retainer will give you 2 agenda. So how is that going to work? What does that feel like during the game? Because I think that's really what people want to know, is just how do you get there, right? So with Li Zhu, she's got her 1 physical and 2 social. So like I said, Toreadors are the masters of social attacks. Her party ability is a great one that says, while this character has a retainer, their parties, meaning her parties' first social attack during each of your turns deals +1 damage to the target. So with Li Zhu as your starting character, her 2 social isn't quite enough to get a citizen, which is your best plan for even the very first turn of the game, right? You would love to get a citizen because you would love to get a retainer to attach to Li Zhu, but you would also like a citizen because it will trigger your playthings, okay? So Desiree, maybe if you could put up a couple of, or like 3 different city deck mortals, we could just see what some of the things Li Zhu would be looking for on her turn.
I do really like how thematic that is. You have the Toreador who, like you said, really want to go out there and be social, interact with the human world in a little bit of a different way than some of the other clans do. But then their actual abilities give them benefits for doing that. They go out into the streets, they interact with some citizens out there, and they basically trick them into doing things for them, and that helps out.
That's right.
Some points. So
that's right.
That all fits together and makes sense.
Yeah. So Li Zhu with her 2 social, it is most likely, and also the Toreador deck has a little bit more social attacks than the others. It's usually a good idea to have a variety of attacks in your deck, because if you come up against opponents who have high social, you're going to want to try to come after them through a different angle, okay? So it's not, if your deck is mostly social, you don't want to like leave out physical and mental attacks, and you might even want a ranged attack too, for various reasons. So anyway, but Li Zhu Chen, her best bet is probably social, because she starts with 2 social. She would love to get to 3. Now with a 4-card starting hand, you may or may not have you may not have a social attack card, right? But it is very important to get a retainer attached to Li Zhu as soon as possible, because that is going to allow her party bonus to happen real quick, right? So if you find yourself without any social combat cards to get her to 3, but there's a vagrant out there, that vagrant is just fine. Even though it is not a citizen, you still can get that retainer, which will then make her party ability work in future turns, all right? It's unlikely you're going to get 2 attacks on the first turn because you only have 2 actions. To get a second attack, you would need to recruit a character and have them come out in the streets and attack. So you can't have recruit and 2 attacks in the same turn, right? Because that would be 3 actions. Right. So Vagrant is not a citizen, but it is a retainer that would, I saw someone say Vagrant is not a citizen. Correct. Vagrant isn't a citizen, but a Vagrant is a retainer, which will allow Li Zhu's party ability to work in the future. Her party ability requires that you have a retainer. Okay. So and with her 2 social, she can make that attack against the Vagrant without even a card. Okay. So it's just very important to get a retainer on her as soon as possible. If you do have a social attack in your hand that provides at least 1 additional attack power, you can go after one of the, hopefully a citizen to actually gain all that sweet agenda that you would love to have. So a couple to think about here. Let's look at the tour guide. The tour guide gives you +1 social attack. Imagine getting that onto Li Zhu. Now she's 3 social, right? With the tour guide on there. So that is a really good card to have. That is a card you don't want, if you're playing against the Toreador, you do not want Li Zhu to have the tour guide. In fact, you don't want any of the Toreador to have the tour guide because their social attacks will become monstrous and they'll just rule the board. So that's probably Li Zhu's favorite one to get. But even the skateboarder is a good one to get on turn 1. And Desiree, if you could replace the tour guide with the penthouse real quick, I just want to show everyone a little trick here. This is outlined in the rule book, but I just want you guys to see it together here because it's some people miss it sometimes. So if you look at the skateboarder.
Hot tips for Matt. Make sure you pay attention. Hot tips for Matt.
Here's the hot tip. All right, so the skateboarder, if Li Zhu can get that extra point of social or 2 physical, whatever it takes to get to 3, she can defeat that skateboarder, earn the 1 agenda for defeating it, and then if she attaches it, that will also gain a total of 2 agenda because of playthings. But the attach is interesting. It's going to gain her an additional celerity, which is all good, but it also gives +1 blood potency. Okay. And you might think, oh, well, that doesn't really matter right now because who cares? Plus blood potency, what's that going to do for me? There aren't any cards that cost 7 to play, right? So who cares? Except if Li Zhu goes from 6 BP to 7 BP, notice the text on the penthouse. When a character in your coterie attaches a retainer, that character mends 1. So remember, as soon as the skateboarder is on Li Zhu, she's a 7 BP character, but with 6 blood on her. So the penthouse can actually immediately take her to 7 because you've raised her BP. You've increased her capacity for blood. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's an amazing way to go. And believe me, when you, at the end of turn 1, when you can say, all right, I got my 7 cost character, my 7 blood character out here who already has a retainer, and I've got 2 agenda, and I'm going to be ready to go with some 3-point social attacks next turn. People are going to take notice. So that is a fun trick to do. So don't forget that when you gain that little BP from a citizen, and there's just a couple of them that give you that +1 BP, your character can immediately mend to that. So it specifically says in the rule book that the card attaches first, which gives you the celerity and the +1 BP, and then the trigger of the penthouse happens. Okay. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful to know that order of operations.
Yeah.
Important.
So that's a great thing. So then typically with Li Zhu on first turn, you're going to want to make that attack against you're going to want to gain a retainer, however you can do it. And then you're probably going to recruit another character. Okay. And that character could come out into the streets because remember, Li Zhu is going to be in the streets all by herself. You could bring another character out, recruit a character in your haven, bring them out. You can you can obviously bring them out before she attacks as well. So you could recruit, bring you both to the street, and then attack with Li Zhu. That's totally fine. Or you can just let her go out there, solo it. Now, of course, a character with 6 blood is probably not going to get taken down too fast. So it's not super necessary for you to send someone out to protect her, especially if you got a Vagrant for the turn, because you'd be able to prevent a point of damage that would come at her. She is not very vulnerable in the early part of the game. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, is there a clan that you would recommend playing alongside Toreador to beef them up a little bit? Because you're saying that she's not too vulnerable at the beginning, but in general, they're not the beefiest of clans, right? So are there other weaknesses they have that could be sort of balanced out by another clan?
Well, they're actually they are, like, I've called them the jack of all trades. So they do fight pretty well, but they don't have the real killer instinct that like the Bruja do, right?
Right.
They're a single attack from a Toreador is not likely to take down a larger vampire. Larger being like 4 or 5, four, 5 or 6, right? Maybe even 4 is not quite right, since they can do 4 sometimes, but like a 5 plus is kind of big vampires. Very difficult for Toreador to take one out in one blow. The Bruja, once they get established, it might be a little bit easier for them to like take a big guy out, but typically it would take them a couple turns to get all the pieces into place to be able to do it. So Bruja are still pretty good for those big swings. But Toreador can get there with the right stuff. Like if they manage to get the tour guide with that plus social, right? Because it all adds up. Now, of course, Li Zhu's party ability can also be used for herself, right? It's the first time you make an attack during your turn. If it's a social attack, you get +1 damage on that. So if she wants to make the attack, she can, or she can sit there as like the world's largest blocker and give that party ability to someone else who wants to make a social attack. That also becomes important once Li Zhu already has 3 attachments, because 3 attachments is the limit, whether that's retainers, titles, anything else like that. Okay. Okay, so let's look at a couple of cards. Desiree, can you put up those ongoing cards that the Toreador have? These are some cards. We'll talk about characters, because I'm going to show you some cards that are good building blocks for the Toreador, and then we'll look at which characters go with those the best, and then what you can do with that. So one of the things I mentioned was it's imperative that Li Zhu gets a retainer as soon as possible. You want to turn her ability on as soon as you can. And Beauty as a Beast is another way that you can do it. It's an unhosted action. So instead of recruiting a character in your first turn, if there was a juicy citizen out there for Li Zhu, you could play Beauty as a Beast as an unhosted action. Unhosted means you don't have to exhaust a character. And then during a social attack against a City Deck mortal, you can exhaust Beauty as a Beast. The attacker deals +1 to the target. Okay, so that is another way. Instead of using a combat card, you can use this unhosted action on your first turn. Now, again, Li Zhu would be your only character at that point, because you used 1 action to play the Beauty as a Beast and the 2nd action to make the attack. But it is unlikely that you're going to get taken out on the very first turn during the round before your next turn comes around. And once you've got another character out there, you're probably good. So Beauty as a Beast is a great way to, in case you don't have a combat card and you really want a citizen, which is probably good. So these are some ongoing cards you're seeing here that are good building blocks for the team. The search engine is a good way to get to the cards that you need, and so that you're always drawing the best cards possible and can save late game cards or things like that. You can move them to the bottom of your deck, so maybe you'll draw them later in the game. So Li Zhu, of course, has the Auspex ability. That's what the little eye discipline symbol is. That's Auspex. Auspex is all about seeing the unseen and things like that, reading minds and whatnot. So, and this card is called Search Engine, which of course, the character there is reading 2 books at once. So this is the original search engine, right? Before the internet and all that. back in the day when you had to look things up in encyclopedias and things like that, right?
Nice. A little bit of a different take on that.
Indeed. This is like the vampire version, because vampires, they don't like to use the internet because, you know, government agencies are probably watching, things like that. So search engine's pretty good, and I'll show you a couple things to go with that. So then there's influencer. So one of the other things about the Toreador, like I said, they're kind of jack of all trades, but because they can fight, they can do, play schemes pretty well. They just have a good variety of things they can do. Okay, so influencer, you're gonna have to pay. It's an unhosted action. You got to pay 1 prestige to put it out, but it's an ongoing that says each character with presence in your coterie has +1 influence. So that is going to be good for any titles you want to attach or any schemes you want to play. All right, and having each of your characters with +1 influence is pretty good. Of course, at that point, you might want to bring out some smaller characters, so you can bring out maybe 4 characters instead of the usual 3 that the team might do. All right. Okay, so let's look at Desiree. If you could leave search engine, but replace Beauty and the Beast and influencer with Bella and Iris, that would be good. Just to show. So of course, when you're drawing your cards at the beginning of the game out of your faction deck, you're going to be drawing either 1 or 2 cards from your faction deck, and those cards will be random, right? You don't have to recruit those characters, but spending draws or waiting a few turns to find the character you want could leave you in a little bit of trouble. So if you do end up with a card like Search Engine, or if some of your first characters are Bella or Iris, then that Search Engine suddenly becomes a very, very good card for you, because both of these characters have Auspex, which means they're doing their little mind reading tricks and all that. Bella Fort is can be a very powerful attacker when you know what the top card of your library is. Because remember, with Search Engine, when you are looking at that top card, you can leave it or put it on the bottom. If you got Bella out, if Bella is one of the early cards you're bringing out, you can use your Search Engine to look at the top card. If it's not an attack card, Bella's attack deals +2 damage to the target. So that can be very powerful. Like, she can solo without a card a Second Inquisition soldier out there in the streets, which is pretty good.
That is a little combo. That's pretty good.
Right. Now, of course, if you use the Search Engine and the top card is an attack card, at that point you have to decide, well, would I rather have this attack card or put it on the bottom and hope that the card underneath is not an attack card, right? You're not going to know until the attack is already underway, because it's an attacker ability. It only works when she's attacking. So there you go.
It gives you more information, though. It won't give you perfect information if it is an attack card and you have to do something else with it.
Ideally, the top card will not be an attack card, and then you know that your attack is going to be hunky-dory and go through, right? So that's good. And then we also have Iris. So Iris is on the different side. She's actually interested in schemes, but she's going to use the Search Engine in a similar fashion. She's going to be looking for cards that actually have a blood potency, okay? And that means a blood potency requirement. That means having one of those little black spiky blood drops in the upper left-hand corner, which are found on all the attack cards and also on titles as well, right? Things that have a prerequisite. So when you decide to start running some schemes, you might be able to find a card that has blood potency on the top of your deck, so you would leave it when you're using the Search Engine. And then Iris, when she plays a scheme, you reveal the top card of your library and gain influence equal to its blood potency for this action. Then you return it. So she can quite easily get 3, 4, 5 extra influence, which is a lot, right? That will often put you over the top.
I can see what you mean about them being a jack of all trades. You can do pretty good damage. You can be pretty defensive. play around with schemes if you want to. You can set up these combos. They really do a lot of different stuff. That's pretty interesting.
Right. But, with a jack of all trades, you're always sacrificing something. You're not swinging for 6 damage in a turn, typically.
Yeah.
You're not, Iris can get you a lot of extra influence, but she doesn't gain you any particular benefit should the scheme happen. So, if every card in the Toreador was looking for attack cards, then the search engine wouldn't even be necessary, because you could just load your deck up with attack cards and all your guys would work with it, right? But by having that, Bella is looking for non-attack cards and Iris is looking for cards that are usually attack cards, it makes it so that you can't just narrow-mindedly go down one path with the Toreador. They're going to be, you like jack of all trades, you give up a little bit here and there, right? I mean, that's kind of the nature of a jack of all trades deck.
Yeah, I think you just have to be a little bit flexible and go with what your deck gives you and sort of optimize for the turn that's in front of you instead of trying to get your deck to do just exactly one thing.
Right. Let's see. Are there any questions out there right now?
We did have one person ask about your history in the vampire universe. Do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I played vampire and werewolf and mage back in the 90s. And then I only played a little bit of vampire here and there over the past 20 years, I guess. But then I've gotten back into it, and I even ran a campaign for my local role-playing group, just to get back into, because I hadn't played 5th edition. I hadn't played the new edition, which is what we're basing Rivals on. So I definitely needed to get back into it, and I just needed to get back into the mindset. So I ran a complete campaign for my group there. So
of the characters playing, what clans did they represent in your game?
There was a one Brujah and also a ghoul who was a ghoul to a Brujah. One of the players wanted to play a ghoul, so she was a ghoul to a Brujah. A ghoul means you've given a mortal some of your blood without draining them, so they just become a servant basically. But obviously she wasn't playing as a servant, more as a companion. And then the other one was a Kadif, and that's mainly because part of the campaign was discovering who had sired her. So it was an unknown at the beginning of the campaign. So that was one of the mysteries of the campaign, was to figure out who it was. And it was an old vampire who had been in torpor for 150 years, and then got out of torpor and needed blood, and guess who? Wrong place, wrong time, right? So yeah.
Well, that's exciting. World of Darkness announced last week that they're actually putting out that free companion guide, and it includes information about ghouls. So I'm sure your friend will be very interested in that when it comes out in December.
Yep, that's pretty good. And Retainer is kind of like a ghoul, but we might get more into ghouls down the line. Now that there's going to be new information about them, right? We'll have a little better variety or whatever.
Very cool.
Oh, Matt played the original trading card game many years ago, so he had a bit of a head start. Yeah, actually, I was a play tester for the original Jihad. So yes, I might have a little vampire in my blood, Anyway.
Very nice.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so where are we at? All right, so those were a couple of those characters. Who else? What else should we probably? Oh yeah, let's look at Desiree. If you could put up Muhammad Zadeh and Balance of Power maybe, and leave Iris up there. So replace Bella and search engine. There you go. So if the team does try to go for as I say, Toreador are also probably the best team to do schemes. one of the best cards for the scheme deck, if you really want to focus a deck towards schemes, is actually the PR firm, but that is in the crypt pack. So when you decide to customize your deck, if you want to go scheme heavy, the PR firm's pretty good, because it can give you agenda when you get some schemes going. Now, towards the scheme end of things, you're going to have to, when your characters are coming out, Muhammad there has, he's going to get +1 influence for each attached retainer, and that's attached to him. So he can get up to 3 influence right there. And one of the most interesting schemes in the Toreador deck is the balance of power. It's unique in that it's you get to decide what the sides are in the balance of power. Okay, here depicted in the art, we've got 2 characters who are oppressing 2 other characters who are like, no, leave us alone, kind of thing. So anyway, Iris playing a balance of power and Muhammad contributing his influence could make this balance of power go really well. Now, in a 4-player game, the balance of power does not have to be fair. Like, vampires by their nature are just not fair. It's not fair that they get to live forever. It's not fair that they sometimes, that they drain people's blood and sometimes kill them in order to feast. So you don't have to be fair with the balance of power. In a 4-player game, you could choose 3 players to be on your side, all against one other player who is now the who everyone else is ganging up on. Okay, now when playing a balance of power, you're just choosing the sides, so it has to be at least half the players have to be on your side. Okay, but you can make it more, so you could make it 50%, or you could make it 75% if you chose 3 of the 4. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
For sure.
Good. And then there's an influence conflict. So whether you've gone 2v2 or 3v1, everyone still gets to decide whether they're in favor or against. Okay, so even if you've chosen to really stick it to one person, the 2 people who you may have ganged up on can still vote against the scheme. They may not want that person to lose 3 prestige, right? Because each person on the winning side is going, or I should say, if the scheme passes, I should say the people on your side will steal a prestige from the people who are not chosen. The easiest way to do that is obviously to go 3 versus 1, but sometimes you might not want to get that greedy, because having someone lose 3 prestige might actually have some of the chosen people vote against you. And having someone you considered an ally suddenly voting against you makes you very sad. So having a lot of influence, however, through Iris and Muhammad, make it more likely for them to join you, right? So typically when you play balance of power, if you're going to choose half the players in a 4-player game, you're going to choose one other player at least. It's often a good idea to choose a player who has the most influence, which when you're playing the precons is typically going to be the Ventru. So you will see a few conspiracies. I shouldn't use the word conspiracy because that's a card type, but you will see some ganging up of the Toreador and the Ventru versus whoever the Toreador want to mess with the most on the balance of power. And once the balance of power is resolved, each of the people on your winning side, if it passes, get to choose which loser they want to take it from. So someone could steal, if the Toreador steal from the Bruja, the Ventru can steal from either the Bruja or the Malkavian, for instance. All right, so there you go.
Here's a quick question.
Yeah.
When you sit down at the table, just remind me, do you know who is each person's rival? Is that open information?
Yes, at the start of the game, the rival tokens are placed face down and mixed up, and one person becomes player 1, has the player 1 first, the first player token, the player 1 token. Then one at a time, you grab one and flip it up. If you grab your own number, meaning if player 1 grabs token number 1, you grab a new one and put it back and mix them up again. So you will know who your rival is right before the game really even starts. It's part of the setup.
But you could also use that information for this balance of power and make sure that you're picking people on each side that are rivals with the people on the other side. If you were doing
that is also a good way to do it, right? If you're not worried about anyone else's influence, then you could pretty much surmise that, you know, if the Bruja player has the Ventru as their rival, you could, and you want to mess with the Ventru, you could say, hey Bruja, you're on my team for this balance of power. I'm assuming they're probably going to want to stick it to their rival. You're right. Yes. So that is a good way to do it. You got to read the room a little bit, as they would say. So
nice.
yeah. So there's some good characters for that, and Balance of Power is a fun one as well. They have a few other schemes they can do, but let's look at some of their. So you also notice that Balance of Power is a way to steal prestige, and the Toreador are pretty good at stealing prestige. When you have artsy fartsy vampires running around, they can be pretty snooty. So stealing prestige is how that kind of happens. So Desiree, if you could post up a biting comment and backhanded compliment, those would also be two interesting ones.
I love the names of the Toreador. I think the card names are some of my favorites.
Because they all sound snooty, I suspect.
Well, they're just so descriptive. You kind of get a good idea of what they're going to do.
That's true.
Which I think is really helpful. But also, I just love the rich flavor of that. It makes it fun.
Yeah, not too bad. All right. So, and actually, you can replace Iris with, how about Rain on Your Parade? Let's just go ahead and show all the different, oh no, actually Seduction would probably be a fun one. Show Seduction in Iris's place instead.
Are these also ones that are in the starting?
Oh, these are fine. These are fine. You can just leave them, Desiree. Yeah, these are all still cards that are just out of. Okay, Seduction's totally fine too. Yeah, it's fine. So even though, like I said, the Toreador like the social attacks, they do have several. Now, these cards are not all 3-ofs in the deck. So the ones that are Toreador only, like Backhanded Compliment, that is a 3-of, because none of the other clans can use that right now, right? Using the precons. So when I talk about stealing is a big one for the Toreador, and especially stealing prestige. And when you steal prestige, that's going to allow you to bring out some of these larger characters like Bella and Muhammad. It's also going to give you prestige to be able to play things like the Influencer card, which is going to give your characters some extra influence. So a biting comment. This is a very versatile social attack card. It has a minimum 4 BP requirement, so you got to use your bigger guys. But when you attack with it, after the card is revealed, you get to decide whether or not you want it to do +2 damage, or again steal 1 prestige from your foe. If the person you're attacking has played a reaction card that is likely going to reduce the damage to next to nothing, you can just say, you know what, I'm just going to steal 1 prestige from you instead, and I guarantee that's going to be just as nasty. We'll save Backhanded Compliment for 1 second. Let's go to Seduction. Seduction is again all about the stealing, and this time you get to decide. Seduction is good against City Deck mortals. Like I said, you want that extra attack power early on, especially against the City Deck mortals, because you want to get a retainer attached to Liju as soon as possible. But the Seduction is also a good way to keep your characters alive longer, and also, do a little bit of damage to your foes when you make an attack. So stealing 1 blood from the target, as outlined in the rules, you can't steal blood from citizens, or I should say City Deck mortals, because they don't have blood tokens. Only characters with blood tokens are able to be stolen. So that's why that card is worded that way. So now let's look at the Backhanded Compliment. This is like one of the kind of the, I guess you'd say, power cards. It's a Toreador only, so it's going to be good. But the Backhanded Compliment, and Sarah, I'm guessing you like the name of this card. Is that?
I do. It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's a good one.
So the Backhanded Compliment, it can only be played by a vampire with 5 or more BP. So Liju is probably a good idea, but it has 1 inherent damage plus whatever social you're going to do. Now, when you make the attack, it works best against big vampires with lots of blood, because you're kind of hoping possibly that you don't defeat them. If you defeat them, then you just, if they're your rival, you gain 1 agenda. They're going to lose 1 influence because they have to put it on their character as blood when they go into torpor. But if you go after a big guy and do like 2 or 3 points of damage to them, the Backhanded Compliment is you're kind of telling them like, wow, you look really pretty, but do you always wear this much makeup? Kind of things like that. You're doing little backhanded compliments. You're getting under their skin. You're using social damage. Using social damage isn't causing people to bleed out onto the street. It's causing them anguish. It's causing them to doubt themselves. Think of it that way. So if you can manage to do 2 or 3 or wow, even 4 damage to somebody with a Backhanded Compliment, they immediately have to mend their character by that much, using that much prestige. So this is a way to really knock someone's prestige down fast, which might mean they can't recruit like a 3rd character or whatever, right? So this is a big attack, but it's usually going to take a little while for you to get all your social together so you can make those big attacks. Making a little 2-point attack, yeah, it's fine, but guess what? If they block it or they have any social stat, then it's not going to do that well. And obviously, if a big character with a lot of social is attacking you, you got to think about how to defend yourselves too against some of these. If a big character with a lot of social is coming after one of your bigger characters, it's a great idea to actually get a blocker in there, because a little 3-point character is more likely to be knocked out than drained down, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because if the character is defeated, then you're not losing any prestige except for the 1 when you go into torpor. Now, of course, the caveat at the very last sentence is, but they cannot spend their last prestige that way. So if you've got somebody down to 4 prestige and you do a 4-point social attack, they're going to mend their character only for 3 points. They cannot spend their last that way. Their last prestige that way. So it's not an instant win. But of course, if you can do a Backhanded Compliment and knock them down to 1 and follow that up with a biting comment like, hey, what's the matter? You only got 1 prestige over there. Like, that would be a pretty biting comment at that point, because then you can steal their last prestige and win the game, as long as you have a character with a BP 5 or greater and one with 4 or greater as well. So that is a little 1-2 punch that can sometimes win you the game as the Toreador when you've got all your cards together. And of course, the search engine is a good way to get there.
I think as we're working on our organized play rules, we're going to have something in there for tournament play, where if you want to play a biting comment, you have to actually make a biting comment along with it.
Nice.
I think that would be
Yeah, it'll be like, ooh, nice card sleeves. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Extra points for good
Right.
ones.
Now, of course, if you get a Backhanded Compliment in your opening hand, and there's a citizen out there that Liju would be interested in, it's probably worth it to spend that early on to grab that, to use that +1 damage to grab a citizen, right? Because not only are you going to get the agenda, but you're just going to get your party ability going, and that's going to aid all of your social attacks in the future. And then you'll hopefully draw into another Backhanded Compliment down the line. But when someone has 10 prestige, a Backhanded Compliment is not really hurting them all that much. So it's the kind of card that you need to wait a little bit. You want to, it's okay to knock down their prestige a little bit. If you can knock them from 10 to 6, they might be hesitant to bring out a 3rd vampire, right? So that might aid you in the future. But of course, you gotta people will be wary of you and your backhanded complimenting ways. So gotta watch.
Yeah.
You gotta find the right time. And this is also why, like in the rule book, we tell people it's, once you're at 3 or less prestige, you're in terrible danger. And this is one of the reasons why. But also there's conspiracies that steal it. And, clearly if you lost a couple characters in consecutive turns, you could be in grave danger as well of running out of prestige and losing that way. So
Yeah, you certainly need
there you
it.
go. Yeah.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. I did just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for Matt, especially about Toreador this week, you're welcome to put those in the comments. Otherwise, Matt, did you have just a couple of cards you wanted to show us before we end, or we're getting close?
Maybe show Steal the Spotlight. That would be a fun one. Maybe we could look at, is there a couple of questions out here, I guess?
I think we covered all the questions, but we have a very experienced chat crowd tonight.
Apparently, yeah. These guys know about Power Rangers and pre-orders and all that. That's cool.
That's great. They were just oohing and eyeing over your deck building game experience.
Ah, okay. Yes. All right. Yes. So I just wanted to show off Steal the Spotlight because it's one of the more interesting cards. It's a very unique card to Toreador, and of course Toreador, again, they're all about, I'm cool, you're not type of thing. So Steal the Spotlight is like, right up their alley. And this is a powerful reaction. It's only good against physical attacks, but it essentially allows you to, when you're out in the street, like taking out all these citizens, because you get essentially 2 agenda every time you defeat a city deck mortal in the streets, right? Actually, let me do one thing. Desiree, if you could put up Liza Holt as well in the seduction spot or wherever. Basically, yeah, Steal the Spotlight. So when you're out in the streets a lot, because you're attacking the city deck mortals, you're going to, you're a little bit more vulnerable because you're out in the streets. But when you have some of your, when you have a blocker out there, that's a pretty good thing. And when someone makes a physical attack against you, which are the Bruja are very likely to do, and even sometimes the Malkavian, they have like the holdout dagger, and even the inmate, they do some pretty big physical attacks. So when you're able to use a blocker and you play this card, not only will you be shielded for 2 of that physical damage, you prevent 2 physical damage, but the attacker is going to lose 2 blood, which is which can be a big turnaround. So that's a cool thing too. And maybe last thing I wanted to show, I've been talking about defeating city deck mortals. Well, anytime you attach a citizen, you're going to trigger the Playthings agenda. And Liza Holt is another way you can do that, because her party ability says when this party defeats a character, you may attach one of the defeated character's retainers to a character in this party. So
Ooh.
At that point, you are not defeating the citizen, so you don't get the point listed on the citizen's card, but you do trigger the Playthings agenda because you attached a citizen to a character in your coterie. So having her around is a good way to do that. So of course, one of the better ways to combat the Toreador is to grab all the citizens so they can't get them, right? But yeah, Liza gives you a way to still come after them. And if you can take out a foe who has a citizen attached, or any retainer for that matter, but the citizens will